In MedTech, the difference between a good quarter and a great one isn't always the product. It's the friction standing in the way. Broken sales cycles, misaligned teams, deals that stall at the finish line. Every leader feels it, and the best ones know how to remove it. Welcome to Zero Friction, the podcast where we go inside the minds of MedTech's top commercial leaders to uncover the real barriers they face, the decisions they make, and the systems they build to keep the revenue moving. I'm your host, Terry Kuchaluchis. Let's remove some friction. Well, welcome Zero Friction Podcast Nation. Terry Kuchaluchis here, and I have a wonderful guest today, Kasia Hein-Peters, MD. She is the CEO of Evoq Technologies, which is a unique eye technology that does some incredible things from a diagnostic perspective. Kasia's background, though, before we go there, she's a trained psychiatrist from communist Poland, and she actually helped launch Prozac back in Central East Europe. So with that, I'm going to let Kasia give us a little background on her journey in the medical and medtech space, and we'll get started on talking about Evoq as well. So welcome to the podcast, Kasia.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm really happy to be here and have the opportunity to talk with you. So what do you think from my background would be the most interesting for your listeners?
Well, I think a couple of things. I think your personal background, just the fact that you grew up in communist Poland, number one. We don't get that very often on the podcast, but tell us about like your journey from being a doctor, and then what made you make that pivot into the industry side of the business to go work for Lilly, and then how did you go from Prozac into the eye care business as well? So tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, so yes, I was a young practicing psychiatrist in the early 90s in Poland. And this was the time of enormous changes as we just got out of the communist dictatorship. But we needed to transform the entire country and the economy and everything to become a real country and have a viable economy as opposed to what we had before. So not every field was moving with the same speed. And since the healthcare was owned by the government at that time, it actually was moving very slow. And I was already noticing one thing about myself is that slow is not really the thing that excites me. So I decided at that time to join the pharmaceutical industry. And it was not necessarily at that time a definitive decision. I didn't know how long I would stay with the pharma industry, but I said, well, it's really seems to be a little bit more, a bit more innovation, moving faster. I tried to expand my horizons, and I joined Eli Lilly because Eli Lilly was launching Prozac, their famous antidepressant medication back at that time. And as a psychiatrist, I was able to create the right messages, the right marketing campaign, even though I had to learn everything about business because obviously I knew nothing about how to do that. So there's a lot of learning involved in that as well. And sometimes people ask me why I stayed with the industry then and didn't come back to practicing medicine. And my answer to this is that I realized at some point that I actually have a much bigger impact on people's lives and the improvement of patient lives if I work for the industry than if I worked as an individual practicing physician, because I can help millions of patients, and as opposed to maybe thousands of patients, and I was a practicing physician. And this impact actually made me staying in the industry. And then my path led to different therapy areas. It led through different companies. Then I worked for Merck, I worked for Novartis, Sanofi, and finally for Terumo, which is the MedTech company. But I like to say also that the eye lies very close to the brain, and the retina, which is at the other side of our eye, is actually part of the brain. So I don't feel like being in the ophthalmology area is so far away from the brain that I really liked initially, and that's why I became a psychiatrist.
That's true, and so the I guess the eyes are the window to the brain, correct?
And the eyes are the window to the brain, and looking at retina and checking the retina function, we not only can see ocular diseases, we actually can see neurodegenerative diseases as well. And that will be probably for us at Evoq, it may be the next frontier that we'll try to conquer once we do what we are supposed to do right now.
So tell me a little bit about like Evoq by itself and its company, its technology, and then what problems or solutions is it designed to either create or solve?
Evoq Technologies was set up by our founder, Daniel Lindgren, and I want to mention his name because he is really behind all the technologies that we develop. And he's been in this field for a long time, having some other companies in the past. But what is very interesting about ophthalmology and optometry nowadays is that it's a very highly sophisticated field from the technological perspective. There are lots of diagnostic tools. And the major problem with those tools is that most of them, the vast majority, look at the structure of the eye. So you need to have some damage in your structure for these tests to actually say, oh yeah, there is a disease in there. But the function of retina, coming back just to retina, the function of retina is impaired sometimes 3 years before any structural damage occurs. So a patient, for example, may come to an optometrist or ophthalmologist with some very vague complaints like, oh, doc, I don't think I see so well at night, or I really don't like driving at night anymore. And they do the tests that are currently available and part of standard of care, and they say, well, I don't see anything. Just come in 1 year, right? So there is this wait and see approach to people who start having some problems with the retina. And only when the structural damage occurs, then we can diagnose, and then it's sometimes a little late for treatments that truly prevent vision loss. So we really are here to promote functional tests because they are the earliest alarm of the retina dysfunction for whatever reason. So the Twilight Dark Adaptometer, which is the device that we currently have on the market, it's a device that diagnoses night vision loss. Actually, it does not diagnose any particular disease, but it does, and it's the power of it, because it says to a doctor that the patient's symptoms are objective. It gives a doctor very precise read of what the problem is, and then it triggers additional tests to find out what is actually the cause of it. And there are multiple causes of retina dysfunction. The most common is the age-related macular degeneration, but it could be the beginnings of diabetic retinopathy. It could be some vitamin deficiencies, vitamin A, vitamin E, even zinc deficiency may cause some retina dysfunction. Could be drug toxicity. There are some drugs like hydroxychloroquine that causes retina toxicity. So there are multiple reasons why a retina may not function as well as it used to. And we don't have to wait until the structural damage occurs to basically help the patient. Now, if this is truly an early AMD, there are some interventions that can be helpful. Like there are some dietary supplements that have been actually proven in clinical trials to work. There's an emerging science on the technology called photobiomodulation that potentially can help in these patients. So there are many things that can be done early on to prevent the disease progression or to slow down significantly the disease progression. And they are currently not done because these functional tests are a very small percentage of practices actually have any dark adaptometry device. And even if they do, they don't always deploy them to these patients with very early symptomatology.
And so what's the impact when that doesn't happen?
Well, if it doesn't happen, then again, a patient comes after a year, the symptoms still continue. And then at some point, 1 year afterwards, 2, 3, the structural damage starts occurring. And then some of these interventions are recommended, but they are not sufficient, so the disease progresses. And finally, a patient has an option of getting some eye injections with the drugs that are being developed for AMD or geographic atrophy, but this is an advanced state. Now, a patient who starts losing vision is becoming increasingly dependent on others. And that's very, very painful for people, and not to be independent. And it's also very dangerous for them because when they don't see well, they trip over things. For example, somebody has this night vision loss and they walk out of their house into the garden at night and they trip over something that they don't see, or we talked last time about my grandfather. Like my grandfather died because he had AMD and he walked on the street in front of the car because he didn't see it. And he was so adamant of not losing his independence that he was very, very eager to still walk on his own despite his vision loss. So, he died as a result of that. You see, the vision loss can kill people, actually, if they are not really careful and if they are not surrounded by others who can help them in every situation.
So there are current technologies out there today serving this purpose? Are you coming into a market that exists? Are you creating a market?
I think it's a little bit of both because the market does exist. There are dark adaptometry devices on the market, and there are two types. One is the desktop device, but it does require a dark room. So very few practices actually have it. And the second one, it's a kind of a goggle-based device that was launched several years ago, but it was launched at a very high price, $50 device. So very few practices actually purchase them because obviously the optometrist and ophthalmologist know that the technology will continue to change. They will have to renew it after a few years. And sometimes they just don't see the return on investment with the device that costs so much. We think our assessment is that only 5% of kind of primary eye care practices currently have any dark adaptation device. So this is the established market, but 95% don't. We are really, in fact, are building the market with these 95% primary eye care practices.
Got it. And so your price point comes into the marketplace. I'm guessing it's commercially viable, right? So
Yes.
is this a profitable diagnostic tool? Is this break even? Do they get to bill extra for it? So what's the
So
you know,
our device, which has a price below $10,000. So the difference in price is huge, and this is because of the way how our device is built. It's a high quality device, but it's built in a way that eliminates a lot of cost, and therefore it's still highly profitable for us. But it's way more affordable for the clinics, and that was the goal. Because our goal is really to expand this diagnostic abilities with the dark adaptation. Daniel built it from the beginning with the affordability in mind. And so there is a device, then because the data go to the cloud, and this is very important because the cloud allows longitudinal monitoring of the same patient. The analytics available will allow a doctor to actually compare the patient results over time. And that's important when a patient was given some therapeutic interventions and we want to see if the disease progresses or not, or if the therapies that were given actually improve the patient vision. This longitudinal analytics sit in the cloud, so we also charge some amount for the subscription for the cloud. And then because the device also has an eye mask that's put inside to create the dark room inside the goggles. So we also charge for these masks as we send them to the practices for their use. So there are kind of the three components. And the biggest, of course, is the device itself. The other two are relatively minor.
and the practice itself can bill for the procedure, right? So they
Yes. So the dark adaptometry is reimbursable in patients who have either risk factors or already are diagnosed with some diseases like diabetes, for example, or early AMD. But there is a code for it, 92-84, and several practices that adopted the device, they're already seeing that it actually created a new revenue stream for them. Because not only the test itself in appropriate patients, of course, is reimbursable, but it also triggers some additional tests that will help to diagnose the reasons for night vision loss. Because the dark adaptation test does not diagnose any particular disease. So it triggers additional tests as well, and then it triggers therapeutic interventions. So all in all, we believe, and it has been confirmed with a few first clients that we have, that the return on investment can be quite easily achieved within the first year after purchasing the device, which we think is actually a great value proposition for the practice.
So now that you have the device and it's very close to being in the market, we're pivoting towards a commercial launch anytime soon?
So we actually launched it we call it controlled release because it's a limited launch. We launched it at this point with key opinion leaders who also will participate in collecting some real-world evidence.
That's exciting. That's always good.
Yes, because what we actually discussed, this clinical path of patients who are diagnosed with night vision loss and the reimbursability of it and the clinical interventions. We would like to collect this information in kind of a real-world evidence environment so that we can then show others, how this actually works in practice, so that they can see how their practice may benefit from it. So we launched this program with a number of key opinion leaders, and we are getting ready for two things, basically. One is the fundraising. We are approaching our seed round. And the second one is a little bigger commercial launch.
Okay. And what does that look like? How do you think you launch the product? Do you have a sales team today? Do you have an infrastructure, or you starting from
No, we
scratch? You
don't.
going to distributor networks, or like where do you go?
So our idea is to find a distributor first.
Okay.
But again, because the device requires some market development, it must be someone who is actually able to do it. And sometimes distributors are more probably better in selling into established markets rather than developing new markets. That's at least my experience. But we are looking for some who have more vision for their own growth and the ability to do a little bit more marketing and sales of a new device like that. Not just put it in the catalog and send the catalog to their clients, right? Or not only put it on their website and wait until people ask for it. So I think the selection of the right distributor is a very important aspect for us. So I think that's the first step. And from the marketing perspective, I think there are basically two things that need to happen. One, there must be medical education about night vision loss and dark adaptation, because as we said, 95% of clinics don't have a device. So even though every optometrist and every ophthalmologist learned about night vision loss and dark adaptation during their studies and residency, if they don't practice this on the everyday basis, certain things may, got lost over the years. So I think there must be some medical education, and this we will do through some established channels in ophthalmology. So we are thinking about working with a few providers of continuous medical education to make sure that it is high quality, delivered by opinion leaders who know this subject. And then it gives us access to multiple optometrists and ophthalmologists who already attend some of these events, both online and offline. So that's
Right.
one, and this is a big effort. And the second one is to complement the sales efforts with the digital marketing efforts, right?
Right.
So your classical digital marketing, we need to be visible in places online where ophthalmologists and optometrists go, have an convincing message platform. So all this is currently in the development.
It's excellent. And building calculators, business models, all kind of things like
Yes,
that in
exactly.
terms of
So the return on investment calculator is already something that we have, but I would say it's a bit, it will sit on our website, for example. So yeah, any practice can go through the ROI calculator and see, based on their reimbursement levels and their patient population, they can actually see if this device is financially viable for them or not.
it's great.
And it never happened yet that it wasn't, by the way. So it's because again, we build it for affordability. So it's very unlikely that it wouldn't be financially viable.
It's excellent. And you got the price point where it's simple, right? It's
Yeah.
easy to bring in. You're going to pack it full with education and informational experience for your users, which is going to translate well for patients.
Yeah.
Supporting a distributor channel. That's another, and that's, as you're, it keeps some of the expenses on the light side too. Like, so, there's advantages and disadvantages to that
Exactly. And
distributor
we,
model.
with a small company like ours, I think, or starting at this point, I think that going through the
Sure.
distribution channel is probably better than trying to hire our own sales team, which I think eventually will happen down the road, but not immediately.
Well, it makes good sense. And, like I said, it keeps it light. And,
Hmm.
sometimes even there's new models too that have sales organizations for hire. They're like 1099. So you don't pay them salaries. You hire a sales team that comes in and sells your product.
Hmm.
And if they don't sell, they don't get paid. And then it kind of,
That could be an option too. That could be
so
an
it's
option
just
too.
some really interesting, what I would call low friction options that, don't require hiring, don't require taking on the W-2 component of the employee. You still want to make sure that you train and that you have to build the content and the materials for the sales enablement piece and the marketing piece, but you actually are contracting your sales team. And so, and it's
Hmm.
pretty easy to build that cost into your sales structure because it's variable in nature. It's not a fixed cost. And, so it reduces your risk of cash burn that is not creating cash as well. So that's the nice thing, that if the cash
Hmm.
isn't getting created, the expense for selling the product is not generated as well. And
Exactly.
so
Yeah.
there's those are good things as well. So, I'll be happy to chat about that later. I've got a few friends that do that as particular space, and it works really well
Yes, I
for,
would like to understand a little better how this would work because, yes, I
yeah.
know that these salespeople exist, and I would really like to get a little bit more educated about this opportunity because this sounds this.
It does. It's interesting. The eye business is so specialized too. That's the other piece too. I think the eye
Yeah,
business is a very sort of particular business, and I've worked with plenty of people in the cardiovascular side that were actually in the eye business, and so
interesting.
I know it's a very it's a very tight industry as well. So
It is a tight industry, and there's highly specialized. So we see very many service providers who work
yeah,
only for this industry.
got it. Uh, well, good. So commercially coming out next,
Mm.
getting ready to go. And what do you think the biggest friction points for you in launching the product are going to be? You sort of predicted, or have you done any sort of battle planning to kind of see how things are going to work? And what do you think is going to be, the easy part of the launch, and what's going to be the challenging part of the launch if you were to look at it?
I actually think that the maybe the challenging part, although not something that I see will stop us, is actually the need for education about night vision loss and dark adaptometry. And not only because it's not so broadly used, but we already start discovering some misconceptions. For example, people link dark adaptation test only with age-related macular degeneration, which yes, it does cause night vision loss, but it's by no means the only disease that causes night vision loss. So I think that this is probably the biggest friction point for a relatively small company like us. But I think also that and I don't think there is anything that I would call an easy part because it's never easy to launch a new product in healthcare, right? So I don't think there is really something that I would call easy. I think what's really
Well,
easy is we really have a very clear mission and we are also well aligned around this mission that there are no frictions inside the company. And
that's good. I mean,
that sometimes is also a barrier, right? There are companies that, people work in silos and then these different teams fight with one another.
right.
I've lived through a few of those in
So
my
the
career.
team has an aligned purpose and mission, and they're all moving in the same direction is always
Yes.
a good thing, right?
That's a good thing. And I think that the only easy thing here is that we all move into the same direction and we are very well aligned. Doesn't mean that we
Right.
always have the same point of view. Doesn't mean that we don't argue. But I think we are very well aligned in what needs to happen next and what needs to be done next. And I think from this point of view, that's the easy part, our internal mission and vision alignment.
Right. And then you take it to market, and then you think you know what's going to happen, and then the reality of the world sets in and you learn new things. You have to adapt to new things, and that's
Constantly,
where the
yeah.
friction begins, right? Is when you get it
Yeah.
to market and you start figuring out where it's easy, where it works well, where it doesn't work well.
Yeah.
Do you have your launch kind of built out and mapped out in your brain in terms of where you go first, second, and third yet? And is that
We
sort
do.
of
So we actually started. So I actually started when I became the CEO. I started from developing a very classical go-to-market strategy, which was already there partially in the company. But I think
right?
I am someone who is putting this on paper now. So we did look at different market segments. So started from market segmentation, very classical exercise. Decided on which specific market segments should be our priority targets. And that's how we landed on primary eye care because they
Right.
have patients that are early enough in their disease development with this early symptomatology that actually is very good. They're very good candidates for dark adaptation tests. There's another group of people who are basically retina researchers. They also
Okay.
use dark adaptation, but for a different reason. So we can kind of have our primary and secondary target. We also have some other. Basically, everyone who's doing primary eye care is the great candidate for this dark adaptation device. And then when we started looking at drivers and barriers in these segments, we started looking at the needs that they have and what are the kind of the product outcomes that we can offer to meet these needs. And as you know, in the healthcare space, there's always clinical need. There's always economical need, operational and experiential. So we kind of work around these four and build our value proposition around this. And then started developing our messages, kind of we went as far as kind of building some key message pillars, because now we know, and a message pillar is basically a theme that we need to cover with these audiences. So we are currently have identified a series of these themes that are important for them, and we have to build our medical education and our product promotion around these themes. So we went as far as understanding those. So I think that we progressing very relatively fast with developing of a proper marketing campaign.
Well,
And
good.
it's
So
important
what,
because then we need to train salespeople how to talk about the product, what to focus
of
on,
course,
right? What is important for the audience from the point of view of this particular product.
and that's, like one of those things where that used to be a really big challenge, getting people trained consistently. Back when I started my man, it was all done in person, and you had to fly in, and
Mm.
it cost a lot of money, and you took people out of the field for 1 or 2 or 3 weeks, depending on how long training. I mean, you did it with Prozac. I'm sure you remember
Oh,
the
definitely.
days when
It
you,
was all face to face,
right?
flying around the world sometimes. Yeah,
And so
absolutely.
now, you can build your scripts, you can have AI generate it, you can have AI avatars do the training,
Hmm.
from an asynchronous perspective online, and
Yeah.
you can monitor it, you can quiz it, you can score it, there's so many different wonderful things in today's age that at least that part of the heavy lifting of training has become much, still means you have to build the training content and the
Yeah.
material, but that's the hard part. Then you just fill it into the channel, and then you can monitor it and go. So that must be
True.
something that you're very excited about,
Yes.
because that'll make it go fast. That's one thing that, you can measure it, monitor it, and those are always fun things. And
I also,
when do you anticipate like the green day of Go? Like, when's Go Day, do you think? I know you're raising the funds, you need to get the money to fund the launch, but like, when do you think that's all going to happen?
I actually think it's going to happen very soon, because we are officially starting our seed round with me going to an investor meeting next week,
Oh, good.
toward the end of the next week. And I think that I am working with our marketing agency on some messaging and outreach, which should be done within the next 2 weeks. So I would like to say that over summer, we should actually launch the product properly.
Wow, that's so exciting. Good for you. That's congratulations. That's a
And
big
just
milestone. And
talking about AI, what I'm really excited about is what AI can also do for customers, because we are also looking at creating a sophisticated AI chatbot to actually talk with physicians about this dark adaptometry and night vision loss. So, a medical education delivered by a chatbot. They can ask
not only that,
questions,
yeah.
they can ask questions, they can get answers, right? Because we have compiled already so much information about these topics that just feeding properly a chatbot with this information creates a knowledge center.
And even
And I think
feed it
that's
to
what I'm
Chat
also very
GPT,
excited about.
or even feed it to Chat GPT or Gemini
Mhm.
as well, because, the one thing that we're starting to learn is that consumers are using answer engine search optimization more than Google these days. So you still go to Google, but if you notice when you go into Google, Gemini pops in, and
Yes,
AI is becoming a bigger part of that search. And I just
true.
went and purchased a computer the other day that I actually gave ChatGPT my specs. They
Hmm.
gave me 3 models to go look for.
Yeah.
So, that whole concept of people, used to have medical ailments, and they would go to Google to get the information. And now Chat and ChatGPT and
Yeah.
Claude and Gemini and all these other AI tools are becoming prominent information providers on next steps for patients. And that's another really interesting angle. So
That's true. That's true. So I think that eventually we also have some very early materials for patients that can be delivered through the primary eye care clinics. But I think that people will be looking for this information online as well. And
everywhere.
we definitely will be doing something around that.
So for those people in LinkedIn looking, and if you're in a restaurant trying to read the menu in dark light, this is a device that can actually help diagnose the problem, right?
Yes, if people feel that their night vision somehow declined, I think they really need to do something about it, because it may be it may be the earliest alarm of something happening with retina.
How often are you in a restaurant when you see somebody pull their phone out and look at the menu with the light? So I mean, I've done it. So
I do it. So I did obviously that test, and my dark adaptation is good. but I still do it. I think I'm doing this because I'm becoming a bit of a short, I need reading glasses, for example. So either I get the reading glasses or I use my phone and take the menu, away from me. But yes, I think that might be the problem. And the biggest problem is really driving at night. People who don't adapt
Yeah,
well to
dangerous.
darkness. And, the twilight comes in the evening. And before they adapt to darkness, there's this 20, 30 minutes when they actually don't see well. That's really the problem.
Well, good. Well, I've certainly enjoyed our day today. I have one more question for you, and
Sure.
it's a question that I like to ask all my guests. And sometimes I'm successful, sometimes I'm not. But today I remember to ask it is that, so Kasia, current day Kasia goes back and meets 22-year-old Kasia back in communist Poland.
Yes.
What is the one piece of advice you would give your current day self to your 22-year-old self?
I would basically tell myself back then that I should prepare for the change because we did not expect any change happening politically or economically, and yet it happened. And then it upended our lives completely in a good way, in my case. So and we were not getting ready in any way for the change. The advice I would have given my younger self was that first and foremost, you need to prepare for many, many changes that will happen in your life. So don't think that any decision is final. There are no final decisions. That's one. And the second one, I would say probably don't think, following up on this, there's no final decision. Don't think that what you've chosen right now is the end of the story. So don't fret too much around, do you choose A or do you choose B? You can choose A and then you can abandon it and still go to B, right?
Right.
We had this feeling that every choice is final, like I will not be able to go back and revisit. That's the advice I would give myself. You can always go back and revisit. You can always change. You can always pivot.
Well, and you've done it throughout your entire life, and your career has been nothing but success and pivot and change and pivot and change and pivot and
Exactly.
change. And you certainly have, you've given yourself that advice and you've lived it as well. So that's wonderful. So Kasia, great to meet you today. Thank you so much. We wish Evoq a very successful launch, and I look forward to staying close to you and figuring out if there's any ways that I can be of assistance and support as you take this novel new diagnostic tool into a market where now physicians can, viably use it in their practice. And that's always a great way to transform the way care is delivered. So thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.
Good luck on your trip, by the way. Go
Thanks.
get them.
Thanks.
That's a wrap on Zero Friction, the show built around one simple idea. Remove the barriers and the revenue will follow. If today's conversation was valuable, please subscribe and share it with somebody who needs to hear it. That's how we will grow this community. I'm Terry Kuchaluchis, a revenue architect powered by AI. Come find me at my website, myrevrx.com, and let's talk about what friction is costing you and your organization. Until next time, keep removing the barriers and keep the revenue flowing.